beautiful day today, or what? We got a beautiful day. That's a blessing. And guess what? We've got a box of chocolates. So I want to tell you the story behind this. Whitney Williams, one of our beautiful speakers, is involved with a charity, and she sent us, for you all, it was like 15 boxes of 10 pieces of chocolate each, so 150 or so pieces of chocolate for you to enjoy tonight. So you will get chocolate if you ask a question. You'll get chocolate if you don't ask a question. There's so much chocolate. So thank you so much for that. But she'll tell you a little bit more about what she's doing and the Congo Initiative and a number of other projects. I want to say welcome to you all. Thank you so much for taking time to come and spend together. This is all about an organization that I founded early last year called Upward, uniting professional women, accelerating relationships and development. So it's all about how we can come together and help each other advance, right? The research that I've been evaluating over the past year since I started Upward points to a number of things, structural reasons why women don't advance. One of the big ones is a lack of access to informal networks. We're busy, we got all kinds of stuff going on, and who wants to take the time to go do that? And frankly, the numbers are so small within our companies that it's hard to do that just within your company. So you really do have to extend your reach and make an effort to go outside of your internal corporate network. And that takes time and that takes energy. So I said, why don't I try to organize a group, starting with my network, which began at 50 people and is now almost 1,000 people. We're 1,000 people strong. Is that amazing, right? And it is word of mouth. We've not done any marketing. I mean, I've got Maria Kubetta, who's been fabulous, helping us, establish our Twitter page, Facebook page, LinkedIn page, and we've got a website, but we haven't done any marketing. It has all been word of mouth. Somebody tells somebody else who came, and they tell somebody else, and we're at 1,000 members. So we've done 5 events, 3 this year, 2 last year, and we've got 3 more this year with a big gala event coming in November where we're going to invite everybody to it. So this, because the events are what they are, we're constrained in terms of the space. We're not able to invite everybody to every event, so we have to rotate. But in November 20th at the San Jose Fairmont, we're going to have a super gala event. Carol Bartz, who's CEO of Yahoo and CEO of Autodesk. She's one of 2 women that I know that have been CEO of large high-tech companies. Meg Whitman is the other one. And she is such a straight shooter. I don't know if you guys know Carol. How many people know Carol? She will tell you like it is, whether you like it or not. So we're going to have a very frank conversation with her about her experiences, the ups and downs, the stuff she went through at Yahoo and other interesting stories at that event. And tonight is for me all about giving back. I started this just because I feel and have felt compelled to do something. All right, I work in venture capital, and a lot of us are in high tech. The high tech numbers are pretty dismal for women. The venture capital numbers are worse. I mean, there's 4% of the venture capital community that are women in the investment community, right? And there are associates and operators that are women, but the investors who all have the power, 4%. So it really makes high tech look like we're stellar.
Google look better.
Exactly.
Thank you for that.
It's true. It's true. Intel, Google, it's true. We look better compared to VC. So that as my inspiration is why I started to do this, and the whole idea of giving back and helping one another is something that's very near and dear to my heart, and I know to many of you, which is why you came today, and you were selected specifically because you were either involved in some way in philanthropy or you expressed an interest in it or an inclination toward it. So we're hoping that we can have a very specific and targeted conversation with you because I know it's important to you as well. And so that's how it all began. And I met Jacqueline and Whitney. Actually, I met Jacqueline before I met Whitney, but we were at a fundraiser that Whitney was working on with Sheryl Sandberg. It was at her house, poker match, pretty cool. She's going to tell you about that. And so raising capital for the Congo Initiative. And so I met her and I told her about what we were doing here. And she's like, I'm in. I'm all in. And Jacqueline, before that, I met Jacqueline through a mutual friend, Nancy Duarte, actually. Some of you may know Nancy. She spoke at a topical discussion like we're having today as well. And Jacqueline had the same reaction. Definitely want to help. So thank you both for coming. I'm going to let them tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll get into some questions that I prepared. But I'm going to reserve some time for you all to ask questions. So as soon as you have a question, we have two roamers with mics, Julie and Maria on that side, and they'll bring the mics over to you because we are taping so that we can have this on our website, and I'm going to blog about it as well. So if you could wait for a mic, that would be great. But with that, we're going to jump into it. So Whitney, why don't you go first? And thank you so much, both of you, for coming. And they look lovely, don't they? Okay, you first.
Great. Well, thank you all. So I'm Whitney Williams. I'm a Montanan, but I live up in Seattle now. And I guess the short version about me is I was born sort of into public service. My parents are both politicians, and I came from sort of a long line of people who were public servants and believed in giving back. So for me and my family, it was never a sort of a question about whether you were going to give back, but sort of how you were going to do that. And I feel like I got really lucky in my life, both to be sort of born into the family I was born into, but also to be given lots of opportunities by extraordinary people, mostly women, who sort of saw the potential in me at different points in my life. And so I worked in this incredible opportunity I had. I had a job with Hillary Clinton when she was the First Lady of the United States in the 90s, and she hired me in 1996 when she wrote that book, It Takes a Village. And I ran around the country on this book tour thinking I had any idea what I was doing, and I didn't. And Hillary's very fond of giving women a chance, and gave me a chance. And ultimately, by the end of the term in the White House, I had a position where I was directing operations in the White House, which meant that I ran the road show for her. So I got to travel around the world, and it was this extraordinary opportunity to sort of see history in the making and to do it alongside this unbelievable woman, but particularly got to see the power and sort of potential of the poorest folks in the world. So we spent a lot of time, particularly with women and kids in developing countries, and I got really excited. I had never been, I think I left, the only time I'd been out of the country, I was maybe 19 or something. I went to Ireland. And then when I got this job with Hillary, I ended up going to like 50 countries with her. So some for a day. But it was incredible, and I got really excited about the idea that you could sort of work in those types of environments and support women like Hillary. Not that there's a lot of women like Hillary, but really powerful people who had a voice to make a difference. So I did that, and I got excited about the idea of what more I could do when I left the White House. And ultimately, after a brief stop in an incredible charitable foundation called Casey Family Programs, which is the UPS money. UPS was started in Seattle 1920, I think. I worked for that family for a bit and then started my own company, which I can tell you a bit more about, but it's about 10 years old now, and it's a social impact consulting agency based up in Seattle. So I've gotten really lucky, and in part, when Lisa asked me if I would come, I got so excited to know that all of you were getting together, and I think that this idea of sort of mentors and having informal networks is critical, and I certainly wouldn't have made it in my career so far without it.
Great. Jacqueline, tell us about your story.
So I'm Jacqueline Fuller, and I run Google.org, which is the philanthropic part of Google. And so my background is my dad also worked in public service. He was career military, and he worked at the White House on arms control issues. And so I grew up in a house where we thought a lot about the Cold War and nuclear deterrence and game theory, and that was the track I was on, and I was majoring actually literally in arms control. But I had this tug at my heart, just this consistent tug about what about the poor? What about the poor? And I decided my senior year of college to change my major to urban poverty and public policy. My parents were so thrilled with my decision. And I started doing volunteering in urban poverty and doing some research in that. I worked for the federal government, Department of Health and Human Services, and then I went to the Kennedy School where I got a master's in public policy in development issues. Took a few years off, have my children, and then when I went back to work and I was thinking about what I wanted to do, I read an interview where someone was asking Bill Gates, "You've got all this money, what are you going to do with it? When are you going to start giving it away?" And he said, "I'm going to give it all away, except for a very little bit for my kids, but I'm going to give the vast majority away, and I'm going to give it to help the poorest of the poor." And I just thought, oh, I'm in. You know, you need me. You need me to help you do that. And so
I can find some uses for that one.
I could, yeah.
help
And
you.
the Gates Foundation it wasn't even officially started yet. You know, they didn't have a website or a brochure. They were just not even started. But I read in the article that there was a few people who were working in a small pizza shop or a small office above a pizza shop in Redmond. So I drove around Redmond in Washington looking for every pizza shop.
Get out of here.
Found the office above the pizza shop. Yeah. And then went through all the mailboxes and sort of process of elimination. Okay, it's not the dentist, it's not this one, you know. Started putting my resume in and cover note in there. And then someone would email me and say no. And then they would email me and say no. Sometimes they would call and leave a voicemail and say no. But I just kept bugging. Finally, this guy named Jack Ferris reaches out to me and says, "I will meet you in Starbucks for 15 minutes if you promise to never bother us again." This is a true story. And so I met Jack Ferris at Starbucks and was talking about, "Oh, you know, I've done research and I can do advocacy and this and that." And he's like, "Yeah, you know, I don't even know what advocacy is. Don't think we need that. But, you know, you're kind of, you know, persistent. Could you write a brochure, you know, for us?" So that's how I started the Gates Foundation. So I worked there for 8 years, and kind of like Whitney, I had done some traveling, but one of the things that I took on when I was there was working with Bill and Melinda and doing all of their international travel with them, and they like to set up these learning trips and advocacy trips. And so I went to 22 countries with them in 4 years, and just really enjoyed that time. And then after I'd been there for about 8 years, I heard about this crazy little company down in Silicon Valley called Google that was talking really big about doing corporate philanthropy in a very different way. And you know, I thought to myself that I felt like Bill and Melinda had helped in personal philanthropy for high net worth individuals. They'd really raised the bar, right? And sort of, I thought, encouraged a whole generation of folks to consider giving a lot more of their money, and B, doing it, applying the best of themselves, their intellect, their time, their passion, and just really raising the bar on personal philanthropy. But frankly, in the area of corporate philanthropy, was pretty flat, was pretty sleepy, not a whole lot going on. Companies weren't really giving a lot, or doing it, I think, in a very sort of thoughtful or creative way. So I thought, you know, well, this might be a really interesting challenge. So moved the family down to Orinda.
Love it. Actually, on that point, and then I want to get back to Whitney, but what is Google doing that's unique and creative and out of the box? Because they are known for that.
Yeah.
Right?
We are some crazy people. Yeah. So I would say one thing is just that we're giving serious money. So frankly, I think a lot of corporations, and if you think about it, if you ask where do most people spend most of their time, it's companies. So we've got to figure out how companies can both make profits, pay their employees, pay their shareholders, and do good in the world, right? So I think one thing that Google does is it's serious about giving funds. So for example, we give over $100 million each year to nonprofit schools, universities. We invest more than $1 billion in double bottom line things like renewable energy finance, and we give away more than $1 billion worth of our products like Google Apps ads for nonprofits.
That's heavy duty. Well, what did you expect to accomplish on this journey when you set out? I mean, you know, we've read about and heard about people that have this ambition to really change the world. Was that your ambition, and was that your motivating force?
Well, yeah, you know, in a way it was. I think I suppose I truly have always believed that I do and that we do, right? My mom's a sort of peacemaker and now public servant, but someone who really believed that, kind of every voice matters. And so I do think that for me, it was when I ultimately decided to set up the company, I didn't quite know what to expect, honestly. I sort of was always a bit of an entrepreneur as a kid even or whatever. So I knew I wanted to do something on my own, but I didn't know what was going to happen. And I think I, in some ways, stumbled into it, with amazing mentors and friends like Jacqueline, who hired me in the early days when I started the company. But also, I think I found a bit of a more of a need than I thought was even out there. So we, as a company, work with charitable foundations, high net worth individuals, and then corporations to help them sort of sort out what they're going to do in the world. And we're 10 years old now, and in the beginning there was sort of a trickle, and now there's just a lot more folks trying to think in a sort of smart and strategic and maybe more sustainable way about what they do and how they do it. So I think it was definitely a little bit of the right time as well.
Yeah, and it's a consultative service that you
Yeah.
offer? Maybe
Yeah.
you can talk about kind of how you go about providing that service, who you seek out, do they seek you out? What does it look
Sure.
like?
Yeah. So, so we sort of work with, as I say, either high net worth individuals, corporations, or philanthropies. And in the case of individuals, they can be, high net worth and or high profile. So we've had a set of folks in our lives like Bill and Melinda when Jacqueline hired us, or Ben Affleck, who's a
Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck. Yep. This
I met
Have you
him.
heard of him?
He was
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
And he was
Yeah.
way cuter than on TV. Seriously.
He was at the poker party.
He was at the poker party.
And that
That's
was
why I went to
before
poker
he got hired for Batman, right?
That's right.
So that
He's gotten a lot bigger.
Oh, really?
He actually has. He
Oh,
really
okay.
has gotten
It was
a lot
so worth
bigger.
it.
Not that we notice at the board
This is why we
meetings.
really
We were
do
focused on the finance documents at the board meeting.
it. Yes, that's it.
Thank God Jacqueline's on our board at Eastern Congo Initiative. He really did get a lot bigger for Batman. He did. His wife
What
was on
part?
TV the other day, and she said, somebody said something about him, and she said, "Have you seen him lately?" Because he did get a lot, bigger. So anyway, so Ben, here's a good example, because the ECI, this is actually why we have these chocolate bars. Ben, we sort of had a mutual friend who was giving back in the world, also an artist who met Ben and sort of said, look, if you want to do good, Whitney might be able to help you. Why don't you sort of think together about what you want to accomplish? And Ben sort of set out to think about kind of what he might do in the world, and literally knew that he was deeply interested in Central Africa. He was in college, as I was during the Rwandan genocide, and it was sort of this striking thing for kids who were teenagers and early 20-something, sort of seeing what was going on and going, how could this have happened? So he got really inspired about it. He knew he wanted to give back in that sort of part of the world, not necessarily Rwanda. And we started working together, and that's a lot of what we do with different clients who sort of say, look, I feel blessed, I want to give back, I've got some kind of currency, whether it's a brand or some cash or both. And so, very long story short, we sort of work with folks across a sort of strategy, and through some of these, as Jacqueline talked about, these learning trips and learning tours to help people really get to the core of what they want to try to accomplish, and then help them build that effort in some way. So we do it, for companies. Sometimes, like Tom Shoes is a client, an amazing company that does great stuff in the world, but they also, Blake set up Tom's, literally, in his apartment, and he had no intention of Tom's becoming what it has. And so as the shoe sales grew, because it's a one-for-one model, right? The giving grew, and all of a sudden they had to give all these shoes, and they didn't want to flood local markets with shoes, which would be a terrible thing to do. They didn't want to randomly give away and create some dependency on shoes, but they weren't even thinking about that. So we met Blake about 5 years ago, and he was like, oh my gosh, it was the fastest growing apparel company in America at the time. And he knew that what he wanted to do was to sort of be as true to that part of the company as he was to the sort of business side. And so helped him sort of think through some of the aspects of doing that really effectively. Yeah.
Love that. Okay, on Google, there are a lot of entrepreneurs here, and they want to know how to get some Google money. So how do you go about getting Google money?
So raise your hand if you're an entrepreneur, either social entrepreneur, for-profit entrepreneur, started your own company. I just want to say to you all, I am in awe of you because I do not have your courage. I am like a give me my paycheck woman. And no, I really admire your courage and your ability to take risk, and I admire that in my friend Whitney here, and that's why I've always kind of cheered her from the sideline, like, go Whitney, go. No, I'm not going in there. Okay, so it's a question about if you wanted Google.org money, theoretically, how would one do that?
Yes, that is the question. Don't miss the question.
So I'll speak specifically to Google.org, but then I'll also just give some tips on how to approach funders in general, right? So maybe I'll start broad and then get narrow. So broadly speaking, I would say most funders, what you have to realize is, probably once a day someone tells me they think I have their dream job, like the best job in the world, right? Someone told me that tonight, but the truth of the matter is that funders are a lot like VCs in that we spend the majority of our time saying no. So it's actually a really tough job. So I had drinks with Ron Conway last night, who's a VC, and we were talking about this, and he said, yeah, we see, every week at least 30 structured deals where we're in depth considering them, and we only fund one. So you have to think about that's 29 no's. Funders are the same way, right? So it's very draining. It's very difficult. We fall in love with ideas. We fall in love with people, and we just realize this just doesn't fit my strategy. So realize that you're talking to or approaching people who have to spend the majority of their time saying no. The other thing is understand who they are, and what they give to, and what motivates them, and what their criteria is. Because I don't mind at all anytime someone coming up to me and making a pitch. So have your pitch ready, and it needs to be 30 seconds. In fact, your first sentence is your most important sentence. Practice that sentence a lot. Practice it on people and strangers you don't know, because it has to be interesting, compelling, and get your case across quickly. So have your one sentence and then your 30 second. And most funders will be willing to take that pitch, whether you're at the barbecue or, in a meeting or whatnot. But if they say no, really listen to that and understand why. Because the vast majority of the time, it does not help you to keep pushing beyond that point. Because at that point, if I really like your idea or your organization, but I'm thinking, gosh, it just doesn't fit with mine, I'm immediately thinking, but this sounds like the Peary Foundation. Or, I wonder if Case is still doing this, and I can email about that. So you want to, if you hear no, what you want to do is be professional and polite, because then you can get referred through that network, and we do constantly refer. And the other thing I would say is it always amazes me how seldom people follow up with really clear and concise information right after meeting. So I would say within 24 hours of meeting, even if you get a no, thank them for their time and just remind them, and then give them your best data, your best pitch. Don't hold it back. Don't give me a lot of flowery words about, kids and changing lives. Tell me exactly what you're achieving, your impact and your metrics. So those are my tips for any funder. And so at Google, we've done a lot of things over the years. Google.org has changed so many times. We're like a launch and iterate type of culture. But our focus for the last few years for our philanthropic grants has been using the filter of technology. Because what we've realized over time is what we, Google, know and what we're good at is technology. And technology is extremely underfunded when it comes to nonprofits. Funders are just not willing to take informed risk, which philanthropy should be risk capital. So we fund breakthrough technologies, applications of technologies in new ways. So, for example, we funded World Wildlife Fund to use drones for conservation. So that's an example of an existing technology for a new purpose. We funded Khan Academy because it was such an innovative, flip the model kind of approach that if successful, it was very risky at the time we funded it, but if successful, had the promise that it could really change education. We funded Give Directly, which provides money directly to the poor in places like Kenya, using M-Pesa and technology to get a 90% effective rate in terms of money. So those are some of the things that we fund, and most of the time we proactively, you can't send us an application. We mostly go out proactively and look at things, but sometimes we run impact challenges. In fact, we just closed one here in the Bay Area. Some of you might have participated in that. We actually have a winner here in the audience.
Who's the winner?
We have Technovations here who we funded.
Oh, yay!
And someone else was telling me a story about how they heard about the Impact Challenge and told a nonprofit who ended up winning. So appreciate that. So sometimes we run these challenges where we'll go out and take applications.
Love that. Great. Excellent. How, do you get a return? I mean, how do you measure your success?
Lisa, we do get a return. We do have ROI. We measure it a little differently, I think, than your community. No, Google being a quite data-oriented company, as
No,
you can
that's
imagine,
fabulous.
we measure. We do look very much at the data and measure what returns we get. It's different for each thing that we're funding, but our philosophy is to actually have pretty streamlined application and proposals, which is very different from our experience at the Gates Foundation. So we agree together what's going to be accomplished, and we do kind of a pay per performance where we agree together that, okay, we're going to give you this money, you're going to hit this set of deliverables. You know, if you do that, you get more in the, hit these deliverables. And we're also, frankly, really flexible because we're funding a lot of early stage ideas. And so if people need to pivot, we'll come back and change things with them. So it's a conversation and we come up with the things together. But if, sometimes we decide together with a grantee, you know what, it was a great idea and it just did not work. The implementation, fell apart. And we're just going to agree that we're done with the experiment.
Got it. Whitney, you have an amazing network of influential people in your lives. So the first question, because we're all trying to figure out how to build out our networks, how to leverage them to help us with our career and our objectives, how do you go about building a network like you've got? And then how have you leveraged it to build and sustain your business?
Maybe you know how. I don't know, actually. I'll say a couple things. One is what Jacqueline just said about sort of the follow-up is no joke. You know how when you get like a handwritten note from someone after, it stays with you, right? I mean, I don't think any of us do that sort of as much as I think we should. So I think being really intentional about staying in touch with people who sort of can be helpful to you, and asking people to be helpful to you. I mean, I think part of what I've done, I don't have a lot of fear generally in my life, so I think that the upside to that is that I don't hesitate ever to ask people for help or investment.
You also give a lot of help.
I also give a lot of help. That's true. So that's true. That's a good point. But I do think that asking people want to be helpful, right? My dad used to say, he was Montana's member of Congress, and Montana, we just have one. And he used to do these town hall meetings, and he would get the newspaper out, and he would do town halls every weekend. And he would sort of read the paper with people from the town hall who would show up, and he would go through the headline and say, what does that mean to you? What are you thinking about? Have you heard about this? And his kind of philosophy was there's a genius on every corner, right? And he was a fabulous public servant, and he meant that, which is that people want to give ideas, people have great ideas, and people want to be asked for their help. So I think part of it is not being bashful or shy. I think Jacqueline had great advice about the sort of, the no, but also being really just, determined, I think is powerful, and keeping track of things, right? Keeping track of people. In your life. I mean, that's why social media has been so helpful. I mean, whether it's, LinkedIn or whatever, just finding sort of connections and not hesitating. I mean, I think, what you're finding with this group is how much people want to be connected, and especially with women, how much we want to be connected. That I think for me, I do whatever I can to sort of stay, connected in some ways. I have found that one of the big sort of revelations, honestly, for me in the last couple of years, and part of it came because of this Eastern Congo initiative that we created, is people invest in people. And people also certainly invest in ideas, but people invest in people. So I didn't realize that as much. I kind of thought, with ECI or other things that I've done, people really like this idea that we're going to sort of fund local organizations who are doing extraordinary work, and that's true. Folks have been inspired by the work, but they're also inspired by us, whoever the us is, the team that we've sort of put together. And I think remembering that, understanding people's motivations and sort of trying to stick to it is probably pretty critical.
Can I say the other thing that Whitney does, and tell me if I'm remembering this correctly, but we were talking about jobs, and we were kind of kvetching at some point that we have a shared network, and we were noticing that all the dudes were doing really well and rising really high and getting some great positions, and we were very happy for them. But we were thinking about the extraordinary women that we knew who were frankly much smarter than them and who were actually doing all the work, you know, in these shared experiences. And we were like, what's up with that? And so I remember this because you said, you know, when I get job notifications now and people say, hey, I've got this great role, do you know anyone?
Totally.
She said, I always think about the women, you know, because the guys are getting taken care of.
They're gonna get it.
Yeah, and
They're
so
gonna
it
get it on
changed-
their own. They're gonna find that on their own.
Yeah, it changed my life because I get these all the time. And now what I do is I make sure whenever I get that I sit there, I just take a second and I just think about what great, fantastic women do I know who would be great for this role? Or, you know, I send it to other women.
We should all do that, right? Okay, I'm going to open it up for some questions and for chocolate bars, okay? This is chocolate bars that are at stake here. So, any questions? Yes? We have two. You go first. Maria's going to come. Hey, Julie? There's another one here.
Hello, thank you guys so much for sharing. One of my questions is B corporations, benefit corporations, and do you? I think it's a really interesting possibility, but do you see them? If you see them, are they working? I just would love to hear your perspective.
I think that's a fabulous question, and it's something I'm thinking a lot about. I was with a VC actually recently, and we were talking about B Corp, and he said, "Look, I think the problem with them is they're like a houseboat. They're neither a great house or a great boat, you know." And in speaking with Sal Khan at Khan Academy, you know, I was asking him about his model, and you know, just said, "Are you thinking about, you know, a revenue model? Because that could be really helpful and help scale beyond just, you know, us and others just constantly putting in charity." And he said, "You know, my mission is to bring a first-class, you know, education to everyone in the world, and if I'm chasing profit, even to any certain extent, or chasing revenue, it's gonna. I just don't think I can stay true to my mission." So that's one side of it. On the other side of it, I have to say, as a funder, I would hate to be a nonprofit, right? Because you can have the best idea and the best track record, and funders are just fickle, you know?
Yep.
It can be like you're doing the best thing in the world, but you just don't quite have this diagonal slant this way that goes with exactly what their founders want to do or exactly what the corporation needs, and you won't get funding. So I actually think it's a very interesting and important trend. If I, you know, advise young people who are starting out and say, I want to make a social impact, should I go the nonprofit route or the business route? I would say go business. You know, try and create it through a business if you can. So I think we're kind of early.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with all that. Let me just say, since you got the first chocolate bar, can I just tell you guys really quickly what this is? So let me just say, so Theo is the fastest growing specialty chocolate company in the United States. They're in like 500 retailers. They're in every Whole Foods. When Ben and I started ECI, we wanted to have a big economic development portfolio, and we found that the cocoa and coffee, Congo is, you know, in the center of Africa, right? It's massive. It's 9 countries around it. It's the size of Western Europe. Rwanda, which people hear a lot about and know a little bit about, Congo's 98 times larger than Rwanda. So it's really an important place, and sort of has the potential to be the breadbasket of Africa. So they grow delicious cocoa and coffee, and among many other things. So we started working with some smallholder farmers there to see if we couldn't help improve the quality and quantity of the crop. And the we there is not Ben or me. We're not agronomists or helpful in that way at all. But what we did was got some investments to local organizations, and these Congolese farmers, the vast majority of whom are women. 75% of the world's farmers are women.
Because who's doing the work?
Right.
Who's doing the work?
Back to the
Just
right.
saying.
That's all you have
Exactly.
to ask. Who's doing
Around the world.
So this
Who's
cocoa,
carrying the water?
it's true. So this cocoa, it turns out, has never been exported to the United States before. So we approached Theo, Seattle-based company, amazing, for profit, but absolutely making sort of as much change in farmers' lives as certainly any nonprofit, and I would say probably more than any nonprofit. They started by buying 20 tons of cocoa, and we did a limited edition kind of bar around the release of Ben's last movie, Argo. So sold a ton. Ben promoted it kind of everywhere he went. And it turns out that it's a delicious chocolate bar. The cocoa is really high quality, and now they just bought 640 tons of our cocoa, and it's literally transformed these 3,000 farmers' lives in this one community, and the scale of that could go,
And that's so much bigger than grants could do.
totally.
You know?
Yeah, so it's so now every single piece of Theo chocolate has Congolese cocoa, but some are specific, and they have Ben's a little quote from Ben on the back, so you can buy it anyway.
Sweet. We still want to know what other superstars you know, by the way. We'll get to that later. Other questions? We had one here.
Hi, thanks to both of you for coming. I have the Congo coffee and cream. It smells
so good.
good.
It's not even
I'm
on
gonna
the
eat
shelves
that
yet,
right
but it
after
will be
this
in like 2
question.
weeks.
I'm going to get to that right after this. My name is Cheryl Conti. I do a lot of things, but one of them is Fission Strategy, which helps the world's leading nonprofits and foundations with strategic campaigns and websites and apps and cool stuff like that. So I'm really inspired by the work that you do. I also have a startup called Attentively that's product. I also am now the co-founder of YesWeCode.org, which is helping 100,000 young people of color with Van Jones and his organization. So in my spare time, I want to learn how to be a better person. And you guys are performing, all three of you, at a pretty high level. And I'd love to know, what's your superpower? What do you think makes you...
The woman who's like doing 3 startups is like,
She wants to know what our superpower is.
I'm for serious though. What do you think distinguishes you and your work? What has helped you to
one
succeed?
Startup. No, do you have 2?
No, exactly.
You have 2. She's got 3.
You've got superpowers. Come on, ladies.
Yeah.
Don't be modest. Women are accused often of false modesty.
Well, I will say this. So I have 2 daughters in college, and they humble me every day. But one thing that's kind of fun about them being at this age is that they're actually asking now for advice, and so just about like the work world and figuring things out. And so I was driving home with one of them a couple days ago, and she said, "So, Mom, how do you feel about getting old?" Thanks, honey. Thanks. Yeah. And I said, "Well, there's some bummers, like, your body's kind of like aching, creaking and whatnot. But I'll tell you a really positive thing is I just don't care anymore." I just really don't care about getting the pedicure before I speak. It's okay if I don't make it, and just letting a lot of things go that used to tie me up into knots, especially about, what other people think, or, if I do this, or am I missing out this? And I don't really value that, but a bunch of people are around that and painted, so I don't know if it's a superpower, but one thing that's just given me a lot of release of energy and more joy in life is just learning how to let go of a lot of that and just have the confidence to be about what I'm about.
Yeah, so I kind of go back to my family too a little bit, where I have like a little bit of this DNA. One of my relatives is Evel Knievel. Remember Evel Knievel?
Knievel?
So boss. I don't even...
Ben Affleck and
amazing.
Evel Knievel?
No, it's crazy. He's my cousin.
When you said superpower.
Yeah,
I loved him.
he actually had a cape. So
There was a little
the wind-up
car,
toy.
and I
With the
had
thing.
that when I
Yeah.
was little.
it
was an Evel Knievel car.
Yeah, the wind-up thing with
Wind-up,
it. Yeah.
yes.
So
The real deal.
yeah, I know.
Yeah, not the wind-up car. She had the real deal.
He would literally show up at my brother, my sister-in-law's here. He would literally show up at Show and Tell in the 70s, which is like no joke. I mean, he was like jumping Caesar's Palace at the time. so I do have this streak of that in, this crazy kind of, family. And I think the thing I don't do
Where are you
enough
going from that?
Yeah, I know. I know. No, the thing I would say though is all the stuff that you're like, I can't believe you have 3 different things you're doing like that, and then looking to self-improvement or whatever. Like I don't know. I would say keep it up, because what you're doing is obviously working in some way, shape, or form, and the sort of ambition that you have around what more you can do is what's going to keep you moving, right? And that confidence and belief in yourself that you can do it, and whatever that is. And for some people, it's meditation, or it's yoga, or it's, sort of spirituality, or it's your family, or whatever. But find what that is, and
Nurture yourself.
totally.
It could be 18 bars of chocolate.
It could be.
We'll
After you
as
have
well.
that, you're
yeah.
I might get another one.
You can be
Yeah.
Evil Knievel too.
What about you, Lisa? What's your superpower?
I'll answer that later.
Yeah.
We have a couple over here. I will answer.
Thank you. So I have a startup, and I would also like to start a philanthropy part of it. At what point would you suggest that I do that?
Now.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that's really important is that Larry and Sergey, before they went public with Google, wrote a letter from the founders. You can find it on the web, where they said to their future shareholders, basically it was a letter saying, know what you're buying into. Right. Philanthropy is part of our DNA. And literally they said, we will give 1% of our profit and equity. So whatever it is that you want to do or decide that you're going to do, I think it's important to start doing it right away and building it in and build it into the DNA, and make sure before you take on lots of investors or shareholders that they understand.
That they buy into it and
That's
they
right.
agree, and they're
Yes.
on the same
Yeah.
page.
That you set the terms, that this is who we are.
Yeah.
This is part of our culture. This is part of how we do things. And so if you invest or come in, because you lose a lot of control later. And I've seen it with a lot of companies actually in the Valley, where they're trying to add it on later, and then people are saying, no, you're not going to take, that's good money. That goes straight to P&L. You're not going to take that.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Well, and people care about authenticity, right? So, I mean, people can sense that, whatever it is. And I think that if you are being authentic to that, and this is what it is, and this is who we are from the outset, there's never a question. And people can tell. So, yeah,
Right, so if
cooking
you
it
add-
in.
You're saying if you add it on later, it
Later-
might look like...
Well, yeah, I mean, and just because you're thinking about it now, I would just go for it. It could be any number of ways you could construct
It doesn't
that.
have to be money.
No.
Right.
It does
Could be
not have to
time,
be
it could
money.
be-
It can be, I
yep.
mean, I think some of the smartest philanthropy that companies are doing is when they think about, who are we, and bringing the best of who we are to the table and thinking creatively. Like Meg Garlinghouse at LinkedIn, many of you know her. She and I talk a lot. She's doing great things with LinkedIn's power, its network, its reach to connect people, with opportunities to volunteer, with opportunities to serve on boards. She's thinking about how do we use our product, our tool, our reach for philanthropic impact. So it doesn't have to be about, giving grants either.
That's great. Thank you.
I think that is the exact reason that we incorporated our company as a benefit corporation, because it makes it clear right from the start to your investors and to the public that your social mission is there to stay. It's sometimes called a legal obligation, but we see it as a legal freedom. And my company, serves people who are living in poverty. So making that extremely clear from the start was something that was very important for us. So I wanted to kind of respond to this benefit corporation question. And being a for-profit for us has helped us grow. And your advice, I think, is really great there, especially around the earliest stages. So getting seed funding was a lot easier for us than it would be for a similar organization starting out as a nonprofit. And so while we're really happy to have raised our seed round, going through this process has made me really concerned about the way that we're funding innovation in the nonprofit space.
We're not funding innovation in the nonprofit space.
And in fact, I went to a kind of nonprofit conference and went around and said, where are the equivalents of angel investors here? How do organizations get early stage seed funding?
Yep.
And someone pulled me aside and said, Rose, people who make it really big in this space, who are really successful, create a lot of social impact. They don't make a lot of money to then be able to recycle in the same way. And So this has kind of been a powerful question in my mind, and I've seen some movements around this. I've seen Knight Foundation has changed the way that they give their grants and is having more of an early stage focus. But I think that we need to do more. And, I've started playing around with this
I
idea.
think we need to do more on the whole pipeline, though, because it's not just the early stage, right? What we call, person with the idea. It's all along the stage. I mean, even I used to be on the very large NGO board, in like a $2 billion revenue kind of NGO, and their total innovation fund was less than $100,000.
What?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So I would say the whole nonprofit spectrum is starved for technology funding, innovation funding.
Why do you do it? Why do you do a nonprofit? Why do you do a nonprofit? If their funding's not there,
Why start a nonprofit?
why start a nonprofit? Why not just do everything for profit?
Well, it's really hard to make a profit, like responding to disasters. Selling blankets in a post-disaster economy. They're, famine.
Why?
Not a lot of margin in famine. So I think there are some parts of the there are some parts of the nonprofit world that are going to be harder to monetize than other parts. But so, for example, we have a mutual friend who runs a really big, $1 billion nonprofit, and I was working with her to see if she could take portions of what they do, not disaster response, not some of the other things, but portions of what they do could actually be created into standalone businesses.
Yeah.
So I think you can, and I think some of the big boys in the field are looking at how do we carve out some of those things and empower entrepreneurs, to actually do some of that work in through a business, a market approach.
Got it.
So my name is Emily Lamb, and I serve on the board of the Health Trust, which is a local health foundation that actually won one of the Google.org challenges. And one of the things serving on the board that I've been trying to orient people is to, think of not just funding projects or causes that you like, but think about funding organizations that, can really scale and leverage and act more a little bit like a VC rather than a traditional foundation, and that our return on investment isn't necessarily dollars, but how much social good we can have and how we can leverage that more. But I think that in the foundation world, it feels a little bit uncomfortable to think about it that way. We've tried to do some different grants. We brought in the professor who wrote the book on disruptive innovation, and then we started asking grantees to kind of think about the projects that they apply in that kind of lens. Is like, I don't want just more money for my clinic that serves uninsured. It's like, we want to fund things that are going to change the way that you deliver. Like, give us a grant proposal that completely turns the model of giving care upside down, and that's the kind of thing. But I feel as though the traditional boards on foundations are uncomfortable with that, and then grantees are uncomfortable with that. But every year I've given you a grant application for serving the same number of people the same way. And so when the first round that we did that, we got a whole bunch of different things that were kind of all over the place, but maybe only one or two nonprofits that really understood what we were trying to do there. And so I would love to move more in that direction, but I just feel like people don't, on both sides don't know what to do with that.
Part of that, I think, is this exact conversation, right? And doing it in sort of communities and crowds of folks who want to have that dialogue, because there's a lot of people in this sort of space who completely understand that there's this sort of disconnect. So it's where the B Corp came from, right? Which was, wait, this isn't working, and there's got to be other models. There's a really interesting project that you guys can check out. It's called Open Road Alliance, and my company helped create it and is now sort of incubating it. But it's a charitable fund, and it's not technically a foundation, but it's a high net worth woman. Her name's Lori Michaels, who decided that she wanted to sort of give back and wanted to find a sort of space for that.
And what she's decided to do, long story short, because you can kind of log on and check it out, but is a really different and I think innovative way of funding, which sort of says, okay, if you're a nonprofit like this incredible organization called PATH up in Seattle, who's doing this amazing amount of sort of innovation, and they've got a grant to sort of do work with the rotavirus vaccine in South Africa, and they're ready to deploy it, and it's ready to go. And the South African government says, wait, can't do it here. You've got to do a clinical trial. We'll cover half of it, but you've got to cover the other half. And meanwhile, this is like a $120 million activity, and they need $75,000, and they can't find it to do to what is that about? So what Lori said was, wait, I want to be the funder who people can go to for that sort of gap funding or sort of roadblock funding for folks who have unanticipated, which in the nonprofit sector happens every week. And what happens is the power dynamic between nonprofits and the people with the money is always what it is, which is folks, for the most part, don't want to say, something happened, right? Something happened. I didn't anticipate that the South African government was going to need X, Y, or Z, but I need the money. And by the way, I need it now. I need it within like 3 weeks. Or so example after example, 29 grants later, Lori's really starting to, I think, make a little bit of a mark on disrupting that a little bit with this traditional nonprofit for-profit sort of model. So it's called Open Road Alliance, and you should check that out. It might give you some ideas. And anyone who ever has that, when you come across it in the nonprofit space, they're a great grant maker, and they make decisions within like a week. And if it fits the criteria, they do $100,000 and below grants. It's a great organization, but it's a cool way of
There's
thinking
a lot of
about this
people in
stuff.
the audience right now who are tied to nonprofits who are like, oh, we've got a block.
Yeah. No, seriously, and it's the
We have a
thing-
$100,000 block for Open Road.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's exactly 100. It's funny with Lori, we find all the time we say we'll do up to 100,000, and so we'll get on the phone with grantees, and every single one comes in at 100,000. You go, wait, is it really?
Hint, come in at 75.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
75K roadblock.
Humor is her superpower, by the way. Okay, on that note, we're going to have to wrap it up. Thank you guys. Weren't they fabulous? Give them a big hand. Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming out. I didn't want to keep you too long. We started a little late because of traffic, so we'll wrap up now. Welcome to have more drinks, any more snacks.
Chocolate,
and,
chocolate bars.
Yes,
Don't
by
forget
the way,
chocolate.
everybody has to take a chocolate because we're not leaving these here with me. Okay? All right. Thank you all.